Okay, so a little earlier this year I found a video talking about smartphones in popular movies. The video talked about this claim made by John Hunter. He claimed that because smartphones very rarely pop up in our most highest grossing movies, that people resent them. The man literally said they used old analog type of technology in Star Wars Rogue One because society hates technology, which I think is a preposterous boomer take. But then I finished the video and continued with my life. Fast forward a few months and I go out with my friends to watch Joker, and I found myself thinking a few times in the film, wow, if they had smartphones or any kind of modern tech, some of these plot points won't work. A few days after I started thinking about examples of smartphone uses in my favorite pieces of media, stuff like Persona 5, Rascal Does Not Dream of a Bunny Girl, and Doctor Who came to mind. I also thought about possible reasons as to why smartphones are portrayed in these particular ways, and it's definitely not because the audience hates smartphones. Far from it. Superhero movies are dominating the box office these days, and with that, you have to consider the fact that all these people are super. Why would Iron Man have a smartphone when he wears a technologically advanced suit that can also do anything a smartphone can? Why would the Hulk have one if it'll just fly out of his pocket once he's jumping around? Why would Black Widow have one when she has a skin-tight outfit? Not to mention, these are characters who probably wouldn't be using smartphones in their day-to-day lives. They have better technology compared to regular people, plus these guys fight aliens and supervillains as a job. They're just not the type of people to pull out a phone to pass the time. On top of that, having your phone as a pastime doesn't really add to a movie. It can be done anywhere at any time. Having people go out to bars to drink or walking home late at night considers the environment. It gives characters a reason to be at a particular setting, and movies are about storytelling at the end of the day, not accurately recreating events. Whenever a movie is made about a true story, there will always be changes made to the story so that it works better as a movie. Basically, smartphones are just harder to integrate into movies. And I'm not saying smartphones don't have their uses, they can be very relevant in movies about regular people, but when you're talking about highest grossing films, which tend to be a lot more fantastical and use elements of escapism in them, you're not going to see main characters using smartphones. But Persona 5 is a video game about people who can do extraordinary things, and they use smartphones all the time. And sure, they use messaging apps and visit websites quite often in the game, and that's because their extraordinary powers are quite limited. They can't communicate to each other over long distances. In fact, they can't use their powers at all in the real world. They also don't have some super tech whiz that can pump out futuristic gadgets. They do, however, have a hacker. And this brings me to my next point. The people writing these stories might just not understand how smartphones or any complex modern technology works, and they either try to avoid it, keep the usage of smartphones simple, like just phone calls and texts and browsing websites, or they might use it wrong and create an impossible scenario. Persona 5 clearly shows that the people working on it don't have a very deep understanding of how it works if a 15-year-old girl can hack the entirety of Japan to transmit a video entirely from her bedroom. The fact that a 15-year-old girl can't hack in the first place is just unrealistic, assuming she started her hacking interest within the last 2 years. But although Persona 5's usage of technology gave the heroes an unrealistic advantage, this doesn't mean that technology can't give any advantages in storytelling. Rascal Does Not Dream of a Bunny Girl's main protagonist, Sakata, doesn't have a smartphone. He literally threw it into the ocean, and because of this, it limits his ability to interact with the rest of the cast. If he wants to call someone, he needs to be at home or find a phone booth. He's also cut off from the internet, so when he needs an answer to any question, he has to ask someone. In this anime, the first arc involves a famous actress called Mai, who suddenly disappears from people's perceptions, except Sakata's. My first thought was to see if her image still showed up in any of the films or shows she starred in, and going around showing them to people asking if they recognize her. But of course, Sakata doesn't have a smartphone, so I guess he can't do that. So a potentially obvious answer to a problem can't actually be done. Now, I don't remember specifically if this option was addressed in the show, but I remember thinking of that option at one point and hoping the characters thought it up and went through with it. So if it was addressed, it was too late. There's also this one example that John Hunter used in a TED Talk. The one with Star Wars Rogue One, where while the technology is advanced in Star Wars, it's still very reminiscent of analog technology rather than today's digital tech. His specific example was that the characters didn't have a portable device for communication and they had to find a place to transmit a signal. But if they did have such a device, there would be no conflict. Movies are about people solving problems, and if there's no problem, there's no movie. On top of that, Star Wars is an already established world. It was created during a time before smartphones, and having different technology just ruins what's been already established. I remember people would complain about how prequel technology would be more advanced than the original trilogy technology, and how off-putting that would be. So going back to the original trilogy technology was a world-building choice for what is already a big franchise that will make it to the top 10 grossing films no matter what's in the movie. Whether or not smartphones are used while in the movie has no impact on how much the film grosses. People will see Spider-Man no matter how many smartphones are in the movie. And Solo seems to be very hated by the Star Wars fanbase, yet it still made it to the top 10 grossing movies of its year. You know why? Because of brand recognition, not because the lack of smartphones or modern technology. But this doesn't mean that everyone loves smartphones. We all know how boomers are. They hate technology and their wives. I remember in one episode of Doctor Who, they made a joke about Pokemon Go and how addicted people got over the game. The Doctor basically had to get to a certain part of a building and he spawned a bunch of Pokemon downstairs to attract people away. But whoever wrote that in doesn't understand two things. Firstly, people in business suits are not going to leave whatever they're doing to catch a Pokemon on Pokemon Go. They probably wouldn't even play Pokemon Go. I should also add that this scene is happening in Japan, the country where people are so dedicated to work that it's very common for people to get depression and end up committing suicide. Spawning Pokemon won't distract these people. Secondly, the game doesn't factor in how high up from the ground you are. It doesn't factor in buildings having multiple levels, and you don't have to be exactly where the Pokemon is. If people did want to catch the Pokemon, they probably wouldn't need to move so much because you can catch Pokemon within a certain radius. And they wouldn't need to go downstairs because floor levels don't matter in the game. The joke, while it's a throwaway line, was just a lazy way to progress the plot and seemed like your generic smartphone bad people these days, always on their smartphones not reading books, society message. Despite this, as I mentioned before, smartphones can be used well to tell a story. While I haven't seen the movie, the 8th grade centers around high schoolers, and there are a lot of smartphones in the movie, and I've heard it's a good movie. That's all I can say on that topic. But a very well done example of smartphone usage was done in an anime called Lupin the Third. Lupin the Third is about an extremely skilled thief named Arsène Lupin the Third, and at one point during his thieving career, he pissed off some guys who run a company on the deep web. So what they did was put up a game for people to play. The objective is simple. Find Lupin, snap a picture of him, and upload it online. This meant that people were constantly tracking Lupin at the time. The police were able to easily find Lupin and pursue him, so Lupin had to find a solution to this. He had to outsmart the internet. Instead of hiding, I guess he kind of used like reverse psychology. He revealed himself. He made sure everyone knew where he was, so that no one wanted to find him. Because what's the point of finding someone if they tell you where they are? That's boring. Then he faked his death using technology because, videos can be easily faked these days. And this ended up with everyone forgetting about Lupin and moving on, returning Lupin back to the status quo of being known by the police, but not being known by the general public. And that makes it for a great arc, because firstly, they used technology as a conflict rather than a solution. And instead of the solution being hacking, they used hacking to help them outsmart people. Because the solution wasn't as easy as taking down the website, since people are going to bring it back up. There's no point, they had to find a permanent solution. And it felt like the writers actually understood how social media works, because the way people talked on chat messages felt pretty realistic, and the designs of the websites look pretty real as well. I think it's really well done. And while a lot of the hacking antics that go on are something that you'd consider unbelievable, it makes sense in the context of the anime, because the anime is literally about people who can convincingly disguise themselves as public figures, dodge bullets, hit targets with guns with extreme accuracy, and cut through things in impossible ways, climb up walls with bare hands, and defy gravity. So yeah, it's quite interesting to go through how smartphones and even how hacking is used in media. These tools that pretty much everyone has can be used for so much, and integrating them into a story can be difficult or pointless, but it can be done right. The lack of smartphones is definitely not saying anything about society. It's just something you don't see a lot, like eating, for example. You may find characters eating in action movies, but there's not a lot of it. It doesn't mean we hate food, it just won't add to the story. And while food can be eaten anywhere, people don't carry food on them too often, so it forces characters to move to certain locations. It even gives characters chances to talk to each other when they're actually separated throughout the rest of the movie, and that's basically what phones do too. But there can be good stories that revolve around the use of smartphones, and the lack of them definitely aren't a reflection of society. If anything, it's a reflection of the people who create media. These people have probably been working with storytelling for years, probably before smartphones were even a thing, so they're not very experienced with this new type of technology, and they don't really understand how to integrate it into their stories well. And some people can, and if they do, these tend to be smaller movies that people just aren't interested in seeing. They want to see big blockbuster movies. That's just what the mass population wants to see. And smartphones simply just do not have a place in these kind of stories. But thanks for watching the video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And I have a Patreon now, so it would be cool if you guys looked at it, considered donating to it. And if you want to interact with me directly, why don't you check out my Twitter or join my Discord. But anyways, at the end of every video, I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.